So we're going to go to part 3 with Chris, and we're going to talk about unification. How do we stay united as a couple when we've got all the stress and we've got a lot on our plate and wounds and hurts and expectations that have to be adjusted?
No, yeah, and acknowledging first off that marriage is hard, regardless of whether you have children, you have lots of children, no children, some special needs children. Marriage is a difficult process, and that's something that I think communicates the value in it, that we actually have the chance in an intimate, healthy marriage to start to resolve and heal some of the woundedness that we brought into the marriage. Through the way that we now interact differently, it can start to heal a lot of the woundedness that we brought into it. Some ways to go through that picking up from one of the previous segments, is just saying no to being nice, right? And again, meaning that in some air quotes there, but the idea that I don't want to cause a disruption. We're having a good day. I don't want to start a fight. Or if I say this, she might feel bad about it, or he's going to be embarrassed. When the reality is we need to say no to nice and realize that some explicit conversation at the appropriate time is extremely important and very necessary to staying connected or reunifying if there's been some disconnection. So recognizing that a lot of times we might have to have a disagreement, we might have to have an argument, we might actually have to go to bed angry, and realize that we need that time out to recognize there's something of value that needs to be communicated. There's a place where I'm feeling misunderstood, misheard, not seen, and that can feel a little scary at first, but embracing that and saying no to nice. Another part following up with that is a lot of times when couples come in, the conversations often start with wanting someone to be right and wrong, realizing that we feel like we each hold a separate camp and someone has to be victorious, and realizing that we are not adversaries, that we are allies in the same game. We have the same objective, whether we're arguing about parental issues, whether we're talking about marriage stuff. Our goal is still, we both want a healthy marriage. We both want healthy kids. So recognizing when we're feeling fairly adversarial and taking a pause and doing the, team last name and recognizing we are on a team with this. We both want the same thing. So let's stop attacking each other and use our resources to attack the issue.
That's been huge in my marriage because my husband and I are both stubborn, strong-willed leaders. And I'm telling you, we've worked really hard, so it's possible. It's possible. It's just that reminder in that moment of like, we are allies. We're on the same team. These are our children. We're going to figure this out together. So good.
It is, and the first couple times are hard, but then you start to get in a routine of, oh, we did that and it's actually better. We did that and it stung and it hurt and it wasn't fun, but it ended up in, we're on the same page now and we're on a good place. So it quickly becomes reinforcing, even though it's kind of scary at first. So another part that feeds right into that is a lot of times we have this romanticized idea that my partner should just intuitively, instinctively know all of my needs and all my hopes and dreams and fears and soft spots and vulnerable places. And the reality is we don't. And that is a fun kind of movie to watch. It's a fun concept to think about. Sometimes you actually have that moment, but the reality is we need to be much more explicit, and we need to be able to be self-aware enough to recognize what am I feeling, what do I need, where am I having some hurt, and then move into some explicit disclosure. If you've ever been in my office, you've heard explicit probably way too many times. but that is a cornerstone of, if I'm not being explicit with you, I can't hold you responsible for anything that I have a feeling about, right? Maybe my wife or your husband is intuitive enough to pick up on that, but the reality is if I'm not being explicit, that's on me. So self-aware, that goes to an explicit disclosure, and then empathy on the responding side, right? The person who's hearing has to listen to it as not, how am I going to respond to this, but what is she or he trying to communicate? And how can I reflect the fact that I hear that? Right? It's not that the partner needs to understand, it's that the communicating partner needs to feel understood. And if we don't feel understood, there's no moving forward. Not until do I feel understood.
I like what Brene Brown, she's an author and a speaker, says about empathy is it's feeling with some person. So in try to identify what they're feeling, maybe if they can't even communicate it clearly, but you kind of go, okay, they're obviously feeling sad or alone or misunderstood. And she always says, like, take it and put it in your heart. Like, just try, and then you think about a time that you felt sad, alone, angry, hurt, and you can be more empathetic.
And that oftentimes that empathetic response feels far too simple. It's just sometimes one word, but if you can communicate, what is that story, what is that experience you had feel like, gosh, that sucks. And then, wow, babe, that really sucks. And you have no idea how that will soften so many walls and so many boundaries and actually make it feel like this is someone I can trust and bring in closer. So keep it simple, right? Keep it simple.
Empathy definitely gives us that foundation of trust. And it's true. It's not necessarily that there's this elaborate thing you need to say in response. It's just we all want to be seen and heard and validated, that we're not crazy or that we're not alone in life.
Right, right.
I was going to say, what do you do when you are fighting over a topic? Like, I hear this often, like, I want to medicate, my wife doesn't, or I want to do this therapy, my husband doesn't, or whatever it is over a child, a decision that has to be made. And you both have very strong views, very strong opinions, both have done your homework, and you cannot understand the other person's point of view.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Can I say something to this?
Jump right in.
So because you're talking about my husband and I, this has happened multiple times. So we always say like spouse 1 is option A. Spouse 2 is option B, but there's a whole other alphabet of options C through Z that you necessarily aren't actually seeing or talking about. So we always say come up with 5 alternatives. So spouse 1 has their option A, and that is an option. Spouse B, and then you have other options. And this is something that my husband and I have gone through as stubborn, strong-willed leaders many times, where he's like, no, this is the right way or the only way. And I'm like, no, because that's funny, because my way is the only way and the right way. And then what we do is we go off on our own, and we also don't do it in the moment when we're heated. We wait a week. Nothing is going to happen or break in a week. And we say, okay, is this something that we really want to commit to? And then we're at a better space. We've thought about it. We've now got other ideas. And there's been many times where he's actually come up with some great ideas where I'm like, it's actually better than my idea. So that's kind of something that we do that we have found really helpful. And then our rule, and this is why we love marriage and family therapy, is if you get stuck, I think a third set of eyes on the marriage is such a healthy thing to do, because sometimes you get stuck and you're like, I don't know, and we can't move past this. And this is why you go to therapy. This is why you see a mentor, a pastor, a therapist, and say, this is my side, this is his side. Help us find a common ground. Because again, if you're allies and you're on the same team, if you win, then your spouse loses, right? You've heard that before. Yes. And if they win, you lose, and no one wants to be married to a loser. So there's usually another option that actually makes both of you feel pretty good. And then of course, as you begin to become more self-aware and confident in who you are, oftentimes you don't have to win. You're like, you know what, let's try it. What's the worst case scenario? It doesn't work. And then we try something else. So I do think that there has to be a little give and take. All of us stubborn people, it's gonna take a lot more work. But I do believe that as I've just matured more in my marriage and learned more about self-awareness, it doesn't trigger me as much as if he really needs to get his way. Sometimes I'm like, I'll just be the bigger and better person and let us do it your way. Yeah. And then if it fails, you can't say, I told you so. It's the hardest part. Anyways.
Yes.
That's so good.
Don't say that. I work on it all the time. I told you so. No, don't say it, Megan. It's true, but don't say it.
He knows it. I don't have to say it. He knows it.
Yeah. Yes.
And then one of my last points that I think is extremely important, and another common area that I see couples as they're coming into counseling, realizing we need a third party, we're stuck, we need someone who can see this and not necessarily bring a verdict on the issue, but help them remember they are allies. And what is going into the fact that this is a stuck issue is the fact that it's hard enough to ask, but sometimes it's even harder to receive, right? Again, we're going into that, it should be implicit, they should just know. But what if I say, hey, I could really use this kind of support, I could really use this kind of connection. And then later, the partner goes to do it because they've heard now, oh, it's important to you, and they go to give you a hug or to scratch your back. And the receiving partner goes, oh, you're just doing that because Chris told you to do that. Right? Yes. So it's immediate, it happens so quick, and this is actually a defensive procedure, because if I open myself up to that vulnerability again, well, now I'm vulnerable to have it taken away or to be really hurt. So there's something in us that is immediately trying to push away and diminish anything that I've had to ask explicitly for. So remembering that when you have been explicit of, I could really use a break, and then your partner comes and gives you that break, it's to recognize you might have that initial, you're just doing it because you have to. But again, what if he feels like he has to because he values you? What if she's doing it because she actually truly heard you and is now trying to implement some discipline on her side of the picture to create what you just made known to her? So what if we can see discipline as a love language? What if we can't diminish what we've asked for?
I love that.
And what do you do if you do ask and you make yourself vulnerable by asking what you need specifically again and again, and your partner doesn't follow through? And then that can plant a really resentful
Yes.
seed, and
Right.
then you end up going kind of to a dark place. Well, see, I should never say anything. He doesn't care. She doesn't care. She doesn't care about my needs. I'm just gonna just handle it all on my own.
Yeah.
So there's two ways to take in that fracture, that misstep, right? You can either take it in that way of, I am on my own and I need to protect myself and that wall has to get stronger and higher now. Or we can realize, do I choose to believe that my partner loves me, or do I choose to believe that they're actively trying to hurt me? And then you need to take that discipline of, I believe that he loves me. I believe that she does care. And so I'm going to go back and say, hey, remember we talked about this? You just missed it and it really hurts. So you're kind of doubling down on the vulnerability. You're doubling down on the intimacy, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
But recognizing I have the choice where this can go down two very different roads.
Yes.
And if it keeps going down the road of I keep making it explicit and he or she doesn't keep doing it, well, now that's a time to bring in somebody else, a
Right.
pastor, a friend, a
Yes.
therapist, right? To recognize there is something that is getting in the way of our explicit give and take, ask and receive.
I've learned that rarely do spouses not care. I see that a lot of times they don't know what to do, how to do it. If they're not an organized person or they typically don't follow through with everything in general, it's really hard to do that. And so sometimes, or the feeling of being overwhelmed is I don't know how to start. I don't know what to do next, right? I don't know what to do first. And so I've learned that a lot of people assume their spouse doesn't care, but in reality they do care. They're afraid. They're afraid of failure. They're overwhelmed. And so I think that there's a little bit of an exploration there before you just jump to conclusions that, well, he or she doesn't care. Because rarely is that the case.
But he or she doesn't care is an understandable and quick road to travel because that's a road that's going to make me feel very safe. If I believe that he doesn't care, well, now I can trust my walls and I can put them up and I can reflect or deflect and defend any kind of movement towards me because I've now figured out he is not safe or she is not safe. And if you live in that spot, it's really easy to create those walls and create that castle that actually turns into a dungeon.
And talk about isolation. Oh my gosh, now you've isolated your heart and your mind and your thoughts and your vulnerability. I mean, you're going to be even more feeling isolated because now you've lost your ally.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. I like how you use the word choose because I think we really do need to remember that we have choices to make in marriage and what we feed our minds with. Am I going to be like, oh, he never does this and he does this and he says that? Or am I going to feed my mind with, he does this and he does that and this is what I appreciate and this is what I love and this is what drew me to him. And, we have to choose where we're going to dwell our thoughts, and it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, well, and I like that, and I use that a lot too because it's making you refuse to be victimized in it, right? I am not a victim who is stuck here, and I talk about that with couples a lot of time where it's not, well, we're married. Well, why are you still married, right? And people, you tell us to get divorced, right? Well, not necessarily, but let's understand you are not stuck in your marriage. Every day you get up, even if marriage does not feel good right now, you are choosing to remain married. You are choosing to remain engaged. And that is a powerful statement. It takes away that victimized, I'm powerless, I'm stuck. No, you are not stuck at all. You have all kinds of choice, and I am choosing to stay in something difficult and hard right now because I value it. Or I'm choosing to stay and fill in the blank. It may be something a little less pretty at first, but recognizing that we have choice and that is a beautiful, freeing thing.
I love that.
I love that too. And along those lines of choices, when we were talking too, and you were sharing your story, you said, and I think every newly married, 22 married, whatever, however long you've been married in this journey, you need to hear that it's really important that you have to make choices to work on yourself.
Yes. We always say if you want to make a better marriage, make a better you. That you can't sit around and wait for your spouse to change or wake up. I mean, I'm not saying to give up on them, but if more people spent more time on their own response, attitude, tone, communication, actions, insecurities, triggers, if they just became more self-aware and said, I'm going to rise above whatever's going on and I'm going to work on me, it's extremely freeing. It really is. And as you become more confident, you become more healthy, you become more forgiving and compassionate, things just don't bug you as much. It's really, and it starts with you. And since you're watching this video, it starts with you. I mean, you can't wait around for your spouse.
Right.
And that is, again, back to the choice. It is a hard choice when both people are stuck, both people feel like the other one doesn't care, but someone's going to have to be the first person to make a move towards health.
Yes.
And that can be you.
Yeah, absolutely.